Hello and welcome again to everybody, our listeners, our viewers of the Suidlanders Media channel here on YouTube and some other places where we also share this information. It's another Suidlanders chat with me, Marius Greyling, and Simon Roche. Hi, Simon. How's it going there? And maybe you've got a couple of interesting stories. We haven't heard about some interesting things about your experiences in Russia for the last week or so.
Yeah, I finally managed to get 4 videos uploaded to Arnold this morning. So hopefully he'll have those out over the next couple of days. Um, Something else that I wanted to mention, and I'm glad that you asked, is I wanted to say thank you to the South African family in Moscow that hosted me on Sunday. Such nice people, Peter, Michelle, Niku. Thank you very much for a lovely afternoon. I'm sorry I didn't accept your offer to go back on the metro together, but I was just so tired after a long day in the heat in that restaurant. But thank you for a lovely afternoon. And Peter, I want to say a special thank you to you for your encouraging words when we greeted each other, when we said farewell. I appreciate your encouragement from the bottom of my heart. Uh, you really, yeah, touched me with very powerful words. And last thing, Peter and Niku and Michelle, this morning I went down to a place where there's good Wi-Fi. And I'll just digress here quickly and remind listeners who don't know that Wi-Fi and cell phone signal can be sketchy in Moscow for security reasons. And therefore, I am doing this interview where I have the best phone signal. And rather than push our luck, I am once again not appearing on camera, just using voice so that we save bandwidth and we don't struggle at all. But back to the story, Peter. I thought of you the whole morning long. I went down to Einsteiner Cafe and then took a walk around the Kaleidoscope. There were a couple of things that I had to get, the big Kaleidoscope shopping center. And then I thought to myself, I'm going to catch a tram just on principle after our conversation on, all by myself with all of the words and the instructions and the what have you that I can't understand. So you were on my mind flat out this morning. I just caught the tram as far as I could and then gave myself some exercise by walking back. So I'm absolutely shattered. I've got pains in my legs. You can't believe people walk far here. But that was, I thought, a very nice tale, or two tales in one to share with everybody. Peter and Michelle and Nico. Well, Nico is Peter's son. Michelle and Peter are husband and wife, and they work as teachers at a children's school here in Moscow. Apparently, it's a very nice deal. I didn't ask any sensitive questions, but I thought to myself, goodness me, but you're living in a smart part of town. And I asked somebody about it, Garibaldi, and this guy who knows he knows everything about Moscow, really clued up guy. He said to me, "Oh yeah, sure, that's a nice part of town to be living in." So they live in a beautiful part of town with terrific restaurants around them. It's all very clean, spotlessly clean and quiet, and the bus and the tram and the metro are just very, very short walks away. In fact, the bus stop is at their front door. So they've carved out very nice lives for themselves here in Moscow, teaching English to children. And it was just a terrific afternoon, terrific experience. I wish you guys nothing but the very, very best for your futures, Peter, Michelle, and Nico. And that's it from me, Marius. I don't know. Shall we get into the serious stuff?
Yeah, let's get into the serious stuff. I just want to add to that. when I was overseas, it was always nice to run into South Africans. It's like a long lost family that you've never met when you meet other South Africans in other parts of the country. I don't know if it's like that for the English or the Spanish or the USA or but for us South Africans, I mean, if you meet another South African outside of our country, it is just a joy. But like you rightly said, Simon, let's get to the serious stuff. I can maybe throw out a couple of headlines and then you can obviously give a more depth view of the things. And that was that Iran did strike some of the USA bases there in the Middle East. Qatar, I think, is one of them. But what the mainstream media doesn't say that often, I've seen on the mainstream media, is that Iran gave them a couple of hours heads up. That's for the USA and for the other countries where the bases are situated to say, listen here, we are going to launch a couple of missiles in your country towards the USA bases and so forth and so forth. And they did so. It wasn't very successful apparently. But yeah, that's what I've gotten so far from my little scrolling and searching for things that's happening there.
Yes, Iran retaliated for the US strikes by sending 9 ballistic missiles toward a base in Qatar. And according to most sources, they were all intercepted. So no harm was done. There were no injuries reported, no big dramas. And as you rightly say, they did indeed give a few hours advance warning. So it was more a matter of a principle that they struck back rather than that they were endeavoring to achieve anything spectacular. Otherwise, they wouldn't have warned, obviously.
Yeah.
It seems as if Iran really is fighting this fight with the gloves on. It hasn't taken the gloves off yet. By all accounts, they have a stockpile of over 1,500 ballistic missiles. So we've only seen a very small portion of those used over the past, whatever it is now, 13 days or so, since Israel struck on Friday, I want to say the 13th of this month. Yeah, Marius, I think, this is really becoming a bit of a debacle for the USA. Yesterday, they brokered a ceasefire between between Iran and Israel. And lo and behold, sometime this morning, Iran once again fired 4 missiles at Israel and insists that it was an accident, that it was a missile battery that hadn't been correctly informed or punctually informed or promptly informed of the ceasefire, that was acting on previously given instructions, and that it was an absolute accident. However, the majority of observers are rejecting that. I myself accept it because I cannot for the life of me see what would have been the purpose of firing just 4 ballistic missiles if you are the party that is keen not to make things worse. In other words, if you want to preserve your nuclear program, if you want this whole big drama to go away, if you don't want sanctions to be increased upon you, you're going to take one of 2 courses of action. Either you're going to go flat out, you're going to reject a ceasefire, and you're going to continue to prosecute the war with reasonable might, even with the gloves on, as we've already stated, or you're going to abide by the ceasefire. As some silly little middle path of just firing 4 missiles at Israel after signing a ceasefire just makes you look silly and dishonest when you've got the moral high ground, because right at the moment, the whole world is behind Iran. Obviously, we have NATO and the West and Israel in one corner, and then we have just everybody else in the other corner. The word is coming out of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum that was held very successfully over the past weekend. I wish I'd been there. That many countries are approaching the Russians and the Chinese and BRICS generally to strengthen relations. In other words, there's an ongoing tide that is moving away from the West towards the, roughly speaking, BRICS axis of Russia, India, China, Iran, and related parties. I leave South Africa out because it's become clear by now that South Africa's role is not a terribly great role in BRICS. South Africa is by no means the driving force. South Africa is by no means a party that is bringing its part or its share to the table. South Africa is not moving and shaking world events by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, Iran has a strong moral upper hand in this dispute. Everybody, bar the West, is solidly on Iran's side, and they feel that Iran is provoking and that Donald Trump is dishonest. The general sentiment about Donald Trump among independent-minded Western observers, people like, for instance, John Mearsheimer, Jeffrey Sachs, Scott Ritter, Judge Andrew Napolitano, Danny Haifong, Nima Al-Khurshid, who's from Iran but is solidly, he emigrated a long time ago, and he's done a very good job of being an objective observer. Glenn Deason, and the list goes on, of people who believe that the Biden administration was inherently rotten and that the worst thing that could happen to the USA was for Kamala Harris to win, and who were, by virtue of that, not by virtue of necessarily being right-wingers. Another ideal case in point is Alexander Mercouris and his buddy Alex Christoforou, but particularly Alexander Mercouris, who is not by instinct a hardcore conservative. All of these names that I've mentioned are people who were enthusiastic about the prospect of Donald Trump winning the election. However, now they're openly mocking him. They are tearing him to shreds on some of the biggest channels on the internet, morning, noon, and night. He is, as far as they're concerned, a man of no bona fides, no good faiths.
Yeah.
A man who is deceitful at every turn, given that when the Israelis attacked on Friday the 13th, attacked Iran, whether you're on the Israeli side or not, the fact remains that Iran had its guard down because the Israelis and the Americans had demanded negotiations, the next round of which was due to take place 2 days after Israel attacked on the Sunday. So as far as the Iranis were concerned, things are going ahead in the negotiations, and we'll follow that route as long as the Americans and the Israels seem so dead set upon it, the Americans especially. Lo and behold, as if once wasn't enough, the American attack on Iran in the very wee hours of Sunday morning came just as the Iranis had gone back to the negotiation table at the instigation primarily of the Americans, and they were dealing with what is known as the European E3 group. And the negotiations were actively continuing, obviously not at 12:30 in the morning, but the process was ongoing daily. And lo and behold, again, the Americans broke faith. So why on earth the Iranis would want to upset that moral high ground or climb down from that moral high ground with 4 sort of random missiles this morning, less than 24 hours after concluding a ceasefire, and less than 24 hours after sending a very token response or retaliation, engaging in a very token retaliation of 9 ballistic missiles fired at a deserted and evacuated US airbase in Qatar, I fail to understand. So it's my own conviction, although I'm in a very small minority, that in fact there was some accident or misunderstanding or idiocy, or some guy had a rush of blood to the head, some colonel at a far-flung outpost said, I don't care what the government says, I've had enough of this, in the name of Allah and in the name of the true Caliph Ali. You know, Shia is short for Shiat Ali, which is apparently, according to Persian speakers, impossible to translate, but it loosely means the friends of Ali, or the disciples of Ali, or the supporters of Ali, the chums of Ali, who they believe should have succeeded the Prophet Muhammad, but was elbowed out of the way by another line of succession. So in the name of, Shia Islam and Ali and the Prophet and Allah, I'm just going to press the button. But again, that's not Iran. That's an idiot.
Yeah.
Or a guy who just can't handle the pressure anymore. So that's my take on that, Marius. And while we're on a kind of similar subject, or while we're on this subject, I have something vaguely similar to mention before handing back to you, and that is that it has come out that Iran had successfully moved all 400 kilograms of its highly enriched uranium to a secret location, and nobody knows where that is. And the intelligence world is apparently absolutely frantic about it. It's reached the point where Antonio Grossi, the head of the now completely discredited International Atomic Energy Agency, demanded that Iran reveal where it's, put this stuff. And of course, this is in light of, if you like, the fact that Israel has never admitted to having a nuclear program, has never cooperated with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and hasn't signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In contrast to Iran, which has had more inspections than any other country in the world, although it's got a very young program. The USA has had nuclear weapons, as opposed to atomic weapons, nuclear weapons since the early 1950s. The USSR almost immediately after them. And even those countries have not had as many inspections as Iran has. And Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and apparently, according to the experts, is the most rigorous abider of that treaty. It abides the treaty most scrupulously of any country on the planet. And then again, we have the case of North Korea. Why isn't everybody jumping up and down about North Korea? One thing I'd like to point out, because this is a mistake that everybody makes, well, hopefully everybody, hopefully it's not just me, but we have to remember that the Earth is a globe, but paper is two-dimensional and telephone screens are two-dimensional, and we get most of our information either from books or telephone and computer screens. Therefore, when we see a map of the world, we think of China as being at the other end of the world from the USA, whereas in fact it's just across the road in terms of the Pacific Ocean, the Northern Pacific Ocean. Likewise, North Korea is just across the road from the USA. And in fact, it's, as it were, worse or better, if you like, than that. If you look at it on Google Earth, which does a very good job of turning a three-dimensional object into an honest facsimile in two dimensions, you'll see that the shortest routes between the USA and Russia in the event of a nuclear war, again, Russia, one might be inclined to think of as very far away from the USA, the shortest routes between the USA and Russia and the USA and China and the USA and North Korea would be over the North Pole. Then they're not across the road from one another. They're practically next door to one another.
Yeah.
So apparently Iran is the great threat, even though Iran has done the best job of anybody in abiding by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and doing everything by the book. Now they've gone and hidden their 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. Not, it should be pointed out, not what is typical. People might find this very interesting. There is a fallacy that seems to prevail generally in the mind of the layman. And that is that uranium has to be enriched to, say, 60, 70, 80, 90% to be used in a nuclear weapon. It's not the case. The first nuclear weapons devised by the USA and Russia, and I suppose, although I don't know for sure, Britain and France in the 50s, used very low enriched uranium because the technology did not yet exist to enrich it very highly. Mm. So it is quite possible to make a nuclear weapon out of the uranium that Iran possesses. However, where Iran's argument is solid, and why Tulsi Gabbard said in March under oath that Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program, and that is the consensus of all 16 US intelligence agencies, is because the other elements of a nuclear weapons program are lacking. In other words, what Iran could do is they could say, we're going to use less enriched uranium, which would mean that they would have to build very large missiles. They'd have to use a larger amount of uranium, and the elements of the warhead that kick the uranium off would have to be larger. And all told, it's got to be a bigger missile, very much bigger. With highly enriched uranium, they can be made much smaller, much more efficient, much more effective. So it's not that Iran is hopelessly incapable of making a bomb. When Bibi Netanyahu says, as he has been saying for 30 years, Iran is going to have a nuclear missile within 2 weeks, what he's really saying is that the other elements required to deliver that uranium, the warhead and the missile and so on and so forth, are 2 weeks away from completion, which is hopelessly not the case at all. So I just point out to people who might think that it is a scientific necessity for a nuclear weapon to have very, very highly enriched uranium, when in fact, technically, it's not the case. You could make for want of a better word, a clumsier or more primitive, a larger, clunkier nuclear weapon with less enriched uranium. But that's not the point. It's all of the other stuff is missing. It's simply not there. The IAEA has said so on umpteen dozen occasions. So, yeah, I thought that people might find that interesting. The Iranians have ferreted away their 400 kilograms of more highly enriched uranium, which they insist is for civilian purposes only. And now everybody's doing their nuts. But it's really ironic. Nobody is talking about the fact that if the uranium had been in those 3 facilities that were attacked, Fordow, Isfahan, and Natanz, and if the attacks had been successful, as Donald Trump insists they are, in spite of the satellite evidence, the American elites and the media and Donald Trump, in the person of Donald Trump, are absolutely insisting that those facilities were, in Donald Trump's words, completely destroyed. I mean, it's absolute madness. Who does he think he's convincing? Nevertheless, if the attacks had been as successful as they're claiming, by now we would have a Chernobyl incident.
Yeah.
It's mental. It's mental. What we're watching is absolutely mental. And how any conservative can buy into it is far beyond me. I know that Donald Trump is the icon of conservatism, which is why he only appointed one gay man married to another man to his cabinet. If he was liberal, his entire cabinet would have been sodomites and pedophiles, and therefore we should all be convinced that he is a true blue or true red being the color of the Republican Party in the USA, a true red conservative. It's madness, Marius. It's absolute madness. This man is rapidly demonstrating what I've been saying until I'm blue in the face since December of 2018, when I was camped at the Miracle Spring on Louis Hutton's farm. He has a certain spring in which the water molecules are very really, it's an unusual water, very healthy. With my son Noah, when Donald Trump declared, standing on the in Jerusalem, that he is the chosen one. And in that moment, I thought, this is deep and mysterious. This is very, very dark. That's a dark thing for a powerful man to say in Jerusalem. He is proving daily to be a dishonest broker, to be, as he put it in his first term, to one of his sponsors. In other words, one of the, let's call it, for want of a better word, committee, not a formal committee, an informal committee, the committee of people that initially selected him to run for the presidency. As he said to one of those chaps, when the chap confronted him saying, listen, you're betraying what we agreed, Donald Trump turned to him and said, you knew I was a snake when you put me here. And of course, we know from the Michael Wolff interview, the biographer of Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, that's an absolutely brilliant interview. If people haven't heard it, they should go out of their way to find it. Absolutely brilliant. The man is a snake through and through, and is famous for it in the business world, and always has been famous for, as we would say in South African English, juking, cheating everybody that he ever went into business with. I've lost my train of thought now, but the long and the short of it is that this has become an absolute mess, and the dishonesty is alpha and omega stuff. There's just absolutely no truthfulness in any word that comes out of the USA or Israel. So Iran right now is playing a good game. It's very restrained. It managed to hide its enriched uranium. It's got the sympathy of most of the world behind it. It continues to trade about 2.5 million barrels a day of oil, largely with the Chinese. So right now it's looking quite bright for Iran. But Marius, I've been going on for a little bit. I'm sure you've got something to say.
Yeah, Simon, I've keep on getting this picture in layman's terms of these two big bullies. One is America and one is Israel on a rugby field here in South Africa in a school, and they wanna beat up one of the other kids for some other reason. And then they say, listen, yeah, we've heard you've said this and this about our mother, and we're going to fight you. But you know what? I'm going to extend my hand. The first one says, I'm going to extend my hand and shake your hand to say, well, maybe we shouldn't fight. And as soon as they extend their hand and the other kid does, they give him a whack against the head, and they start to fight. And then the other kid comes, the other bully comes and say, no, wait, stop. Let me extend my hand as well and say we're going to be friends after this. And then they hit him again, and now that the other kid all of a sudden can show he's got a bit of fight in him, now all of a sudden the two bullies goes, no, okay, wait, stop. Let's for real now. Let's not fight anymore. It's under the pretense of this peaceful safety. Let's have a talk and then bomb you to see what happens type scenario. And yeah, Simon, I mean, let's see what happens from here on. Iran, according to me, I'm not a Iranian fan or a Iran fan at all. But the way they've handled this past 2 weeks it's been I tip my hat to them for the way that they've handled it. I mean, it could have been so much worse. And let's see what's going to happen now with this peace talks. Apparently, according to Donald Trump, this peace will now last forever because he has brokered the deal. And I could just laugh at that statement. But anyway, let's see what happens after this.
Yeah, well, in one of our interviews recently, I listed the deceitful pretext that the USA has used to get into war since the US Civil War, and perhaps going back to prior that, I don't know. And as far as I'm concerned, the writing is on the wall, Marius. We know exactly what's going to happen. The United States and Israel are going to strut about like peacocks, giving as if they are the world's last peacemongers, and then they're going to find some pretext to start it all over again.
Mm.
And somehow they managed to get it right, to gull, to beguile people into believing them, but not as successfully as in the past. It appears as if an enormous chunk of the Make America Great Again base is turning against the USA, and particularly, sorry, I beg your pardon, against Donald Trump, and particularly against the United States of America's ongoing association with Israel.
Yeah.
I wanted to put it slightly differently, but yeah. How long have we been talking now, Marius? I've got one thing I'd like to mention, but that could lead to a few minutes chat. Perhaps we should do another video, or rather than make it too long.
We've got about 5 minutes left, so if you can do it within 5 minutes, yes, or if you can't, then maybe we should do another video and we can throw that discussion in there.
Well, yeah, let's do another video then, because I think that we might be able to make a good 12, 15 or 20-minute video out of that, and it's on quite a particular topic. So perhaps we'll make that video number 4 in this series, discussing the events of the past 11 or 12 days between Iran and Israel.
Great. Thanks for your time, Simon. And then, as you just said now, we'll do another video, a follow-up video, a part 4, seeing that this is part 3. So speak to you soon, Simon. Have a lovely day.
Oops. Cheerio, Marius. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.